Greetings, Slitherheads. With the current state of how poorly games launch, do you think anything could happen in the industry that would precipitate a return to games launching smoothly? Or with the advent of developers being able to patch their creations, are we doomed to experience dogshit launch days for eternity? I wanted to ask you guys this just on the back of Overwatch 2, which we discussed a little bit, and it's worth noting that they were at least partially subjected to a DDoS attack, which can't really do much about. I mean, they can protect against it better, but so it wasn't all them not being prepared. But mixed up in all of this commentary about time and money is the fact that nothing seems to be good enough, even though we are giving you more time and more money, if that makes sense. The games are great and we love playing them, but why are they never the way they're supposed to be when they launch?
Yeah.
That I don't really quite understand that. Apart from products are never done, you go gold and then you just want to keep working on something, and I get that, but it's become a joke almost the way games are launched. And then you see a game like Saints Row and it sells all these copies where it's the 15th best-selling game in the United States for the year already. But then you get this diatribe from the developer going on about how they're going to fix everything. And it's like, well, what the fuck did everyone just play then? I don't understand that. And that's bothersome.
Yeah.
And I don't think, Chris, we're ever going to go back.
No, yeah, I think we're doomed to this, unfortunately. Like, it's really depressing. I was having this conversation a couple days ago with a friend of mine. We were just talking about, like, because I often try to reconcile. Like, I'm a very self-aware person to like a detrimental degree, right? Now, so anytime I'm feeling like, man, things suck now, I always try to look in the mirror a little bit and say, like, no, it's not necessarily that. It's probably, I'm getting older. Right. So things aren't as new to me anymore. There's less magic around video games in general. Like, I'm sure there were plenty of broken games that used to come out when I was a kid. Right. But then part of me has to be like, I'm not just making it up that nearly every release is like this. And it didn't used to be that way. Like, at least not in the ways that they're broken. Like Overwatch 2,
it just couldn't be that way.
It could not be. Like in the 90s, you had a lot of games that were kind of busted for years. Like, I get that. But there was at least some idea that things were getting better over time. You know what I mean? Like, it was like, okay, the 90s was a little jank. 2000s, we started to see like a bit more quality. But then like early 2010s, it's just been this constant downturn of like Overwatch launched. The original Overwatch launched pretty fine. Like they had a loot box controversy, which is not necessarily a broken game situation. That's just like a controversial monetization scheme, which is like, fair enough. That's a huge problem in the industry now too. But Overwatch 2 launched, and yeah, aside from the DDoS attack, still I saw a video of this guy playing, and every time he unlocked an achievement, it disconnected him from the game and it pushed him into the queue behind 30,000 other people. That would not have happened however many years ago. That didn't happen with the multiplayer games that were coming out in like the late 2000s. Or the early 2010s, that just wasn't happening. Halo Infinite would have died on the day if it had come out in 2007. Like, this is so... Like, the lack of quality that we expect out of first party, or even just, like, big AAA games at launch is so low now that, like, it's difficult to even get excited about things anymore. And I try to, again, I try to reflect as like, am I being too jaded? And it's like, I don't think I am. I don't think this is in my head. Things are just worse because now we have this complacency culture of like, oh, we'll just patch it. And it's done nothing but ruin a lot of aspects of this industry for me. Like to the point where like a lot of times, like I can really only rely on indie games to function, And that's crazy. Because how are you making all this money? How are you spending all this money? And your game doesn't work. And people are like, oh, games used to be a little bit broken too. Halo 2 was famously buggy and glitchy. And it's like, no, buggy and glitchy is one thing, right? It's another thing to have your game crash constantly. It's another thing to have your online multiplayer not work for months. It's another thing to have, just core functionality, like your ability to play the game, period, is being impeded because you didn't design it right. Like, that's different than the bugs we used to get. We used to get, like, you know, like Halo 2 was like, oh, you could break out of the map. Okay. That's not the same.
Yeah, I think patching has, I mean, it's obviously been a boon and it's vital and it's awesome, but it's just been used as a tool. And sadly, Dustin, the only way to combat this is stop buying games at launch. And I don't necessarily blame anyone for not buying anything at launch. I don't really feel like if you can go without being part of the conversation, in quotes, and part of the zeitgeist, and have a little bit of patience. And a lot of people, I think, just by virtue of having real lives and families and jobs, they're just like so far behind on everything anyway. Why not wait and teach these companies a lesson in the meantime? Get the game for 10 or 20 bucks and they basically made nothing on you, and you get to play the game anyway, and it sends the message that maybe you should create a more cogent experience out the gate. And then, of course, on the other hand, when a game does come out and it does work and it's in good shape, reward that game as well. But too many people are just so eager to pre-order and put things down without even sight unseen. I just think it's a huge mistake, and a lot of it is on the consumer, because the chase is on the money, and that's it.
Yeah. The thing, though, is that we used to be able to do that. You know, and you'd get something that was pretty high quality. Even if you didn't like what you got, you know, even if you were just like, this isn't for me. Generally speaking, back in the day, I don't remember regretting pre-ordering anything. Granted, that could be because I was a kid, but there was not at any point that I came home with a AAA game that was just broken to the point where I couldn't finish it, or that like the core functionality of it was just completely like upended in a way that just didn't function. I could be just patching these things out of my own memory, but like, I swear this was just not common to this degree. I think it's because, you know, games back then had to at least run. Now they don't even have to at least run. That's crazy. Yeah. I don't know, man. It's
I feel like it's important for us, or gamers will say, as a community, that we need to get better at reading the writing on the wall, because a lot of times these games that come out broken, the writing is indeed on the wall. When previews and reviews of Cyberpunk came out and they were only on PC, that should have raised some red flags.
Suspicious.
When the betas for Fallout 76 were fucking horrible, maybe should have raised some red flags.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
even less obvious things, like to me Anthem and No Man's Sky were obvious. You know what I mean? Like those, like when No Man's Sky was shown for 4 years in a row at E3 and it was the same exact demo, like every single time, I remember being like, what the is this not going to be good? And everybody was like, nah, man, you don't understand what they're doing. And then it was crashing on day one. And it was like, it didn't have the multiplayer that they said was in it. What a hilarious situation. And then Anthem was obvious. And yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, even to a lesser extent, man, like the second I saw Gotham Knights, man, I knew something was up. I didn't know what was up, but like something was tingling, you know, like I felt something. I was like, something's up about this. I don't know what it is. And lo and behold, you know, it's you know, it's, I don't know. I think though that we are spoiled from being involved in this industry for a long time, that we've developed this kind of almost like, I don't want to call it a sixth sense because that's a little pretentious, but like I do think it's like, I do think you develop some kind of understanding of like, you recognize red flags even if you're not necessarily 100% conscious of it. You just like, something about this doesn't sit right.
And I think it's important, Colin, you mentioned about waiting, and I think you're correct, but the only thing I would add to that is that you don't even necessarily really have to wait long term. In some situations, if you wait till later in the day on launch day, sometimes that's enough. If I would have waited till later in the day, when the day Halo Master Chief Collection came out, I would have known not to buy it. If I would have waited till later in the day when Assassin's Creed Unity came out, I would have known not to buy it. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times these like the major issues are very obvious from the very beginning. Like with Overwatch too, that's the same thing. Which I guess that's a free to play, so it's not quite the same thing. But it's like I was curious about that game when it was coming out, and I thought I'm going to wait till a little later on to see if it's worth me trying to spend my time trying to get in and play it. It was immediately obvious. Fallout 76, the day that came out, all you had to do was look online or check out what some YouTubers were saying. That's all you need. You don't necessarily need to wait a long time. And at that point, then you can make the decision. Is it working and good? Go for it. Maybe you want to play on launch and now you can spend your money safely.
Yeah.
Or at that point, maybe the right decision is to wait until it works. Because there is certain situations where games do turn it around. Cyberpunk,
That's true.
No Man's Sky, stuff like that. And then you can play a version of the game that actually fucking works and is fun to play.
Years later.
And you probably will spend way less on it.
Whoa, I only have to wait 6 years for the Master Chief Collection to work? Sick.
Sick. I know. Outrageous.